I'm Geno Bonnalie, happy to be here at the Sentry Tournament of Champions, interviewing Mr. Mark Rolfing, as I've heard they call you Mr. Hawaii around here.
No, that would be King Kamehameha was Mr. Hawaii.
That's fair. You and Dwayne Johnson and Barack Obama and...
A lot of famous people. I'm not in that group, but
no,
I've been here almost 40 years.
You're a legend.
I know the place well, but thank you.
And it is a beautiful place, and so happy to be here with Sentry and everything. Can you tell us a little bit about Sentry, what we're doing here this week?
You know, I've been involved with this tournament here now for, 35 years. And frankly, we struggled back at the turn of the century in the year 2000, 2001. Things were really good. Tiger and Ernie were playing off up here at 18, one of the great finishes ever on the PGA Tour.
I remember.
And things were really good. And then we went through a little bit of a lull, and the sponsorship turned over 2 or 3 times. A lot of the veteran players started skipping the event, and it really went downhill. And all of a sudden, Sentry showed up, and I didn't know much about them. I grew up in the Midwest in Illinois, and so I knew that I liked the thought of having a Midwestern-based sponsor, but I had no idea how great they would turn out to be. This was their first sort of venture into golf, and they had become part of the Maui community. They're not just a sponsor. They kind of just had molded themselves into our community, and I don't think there's a better sponsor in the entire game than Sentry. I love those guys.
That's incredible. Yeah, this is obviously our first time winning and qualifying for the event, but heard nothing but good things. The golf course is incredible. The hospitality is absolutely fantastic, and can't get a better view out here. So really happy to be part of it. You moved here in 1976.
I did.
Is that correct?
I did. Had a good break one day. I actually was trying to get a job as an assistant pro. I had played 36 tournaments in 1975 and made about $41,000 maybe. Wasn't much.
Woo.
Didn't quite add up.
How much you pay your caddy?
Like I had about 8 different caddies. They could tell. They could see the writing on the wall. But I came out here and got a job as an assistant pro at Kapalua. It just started. Plantation course wasn't here. And one day Arnold Palmer came in the shop, and he was designing the second golf course here at Kapalua. And he was going out to have an afternoon game on the Bay course, and he said, "I need a partner. Who's the best player in here?" I said, "Me."
Yes. Even if you weren't, raise your hand.
Even if I wasn't, I raised my hand, and we became partners for every round he played for almost 10 years out here after that, which was a lot of golf. And that was an incredible break for me.
That's awesome. What a relationship to have.
Kind of took me under his wing and kind of mentored me a lot. I lost my dad when I was 11 years old, so I hadn't really had a real strong father figure in my life, but developing that relationship with Arnold Palmer taught me a lot, but it also opened a lot of doors, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Growing up in the Midwest, what brought you here specifically, and what kept you here? I can imagine this.
You know, bad play is what brought me here, to be honest with you. I had played in the Hawaiian Open that year, and never been to any of the neighbor islands, only Oahu, but I loved Hawaii. That was the first time I'd been out here. And I met this gal on the mainland and kind of took a little fancy to her. And I said, "Hey, let's go back out to Hawaii," at the end of the year. I went back to tour school at the end of 75 and didn't make it. And so I said, "Let's go out to Hawaii and just spend a week and chill." And we never left, basically. And we're still together.
That's great.
Still live in a condo down here on the beach. It's a nice condo, granted.
Hey, I live in a trailer house, so condo's nice.
Well, there you go. But it's the same one. I've been in it for 35 years, and
beautiful.
People say, like, how can you work on the mainland? And isn't that just a horrible commute? And all I say is, well, come out here one time and sit here and let's talk about it, and then you'll see why I do that.
Yeah. As we were landing here yesterday after a long day of travel, coming in, just looking at the mountains and being able to see whales out the airplane window as we were landing, I thought this would be worth even flying to in your off weeks, just living here full time.
Yeah, it's a lot nicer for me when I land here than when I take off. Like when I take off, I'm kind of going, "Oh no, I'm leaving again."
A lot of red eyes?
A lot of red eyes, but it's worth it. I go to the greatest places in the world and watch the world's best players, and they pay me money to do that, and it's just amazing. and mostly I talk, whereas just like the folks at Sentry, you have to do a lot of listening. So I got a question for you.
Oh boy.
Like, you've been with Joel for a while now.
Yeah, this is our 8th season together.
It's your 8th season together. So one of the things I love about the Sentry folks is how well they listen. They didn't come in here and say, oh, here's what we're going to do about this tournament. We're going to do this and do that. They really took the time to listen to what everybody in this community wanted and what was going to be the best thing for the players and the tour and everything. And they listened and they took in that information and they made their decisions. That's the way they do their business. But I'm always interested in talking to a premier caddy like you about how important listening is. Everybody thinks it's all about talking, telling your player what to do.
No, yeah, quite the opposite. And yeah, listening and getting a feel, even just reading body language and overall communication altogether is so important. But knowing what he wants and what he expects and what he's comfortable with doing is so very important. And a lot of times my words speaking aren't doing a lot. They're just filler. So listening to him and just providing the sound advice for him to do his job properly is probably the most important thing I can do.
Do you do it differently now? Obviously, he's a different player than he was 8 years ago, but do you do it differently now that you know about listening and interacting with him than you did in the beginning?
Yes, I think being with him for so long, I know when to be quiet and I know when to say things, and I know the things I should say and shouldn't say, and it's taken a lot of trial and error and just time being with him through the last 8 years to know those things. So it's definitely a learning experience, or has been a learning experience, and I think we're always getting better and improving on that communication that we have on the golf course.
I'm a TV guy. It's interesting. I want to get your perspective. We hear so much of the conversation now. Mm-hmm. The audio is so much better, probably, than it even was when you started.
It's scary sometimes.
Yeah, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
No, I think it's a good thing. There's probably some conversations that shouldn't be shared, but for the most part, they are really interesting. When I hear a player-caddy conversation on the golf course on coverage, it's really good to listen to. I think it makes for great TV. The people at home want to hear those things because it kind of shows you what's actually happening and taking place on the golf course. And you know, a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen to where we disagree, and we will both go back and forth, and you know, why one shot makes sense versus another, and we'll plead our cases, and ultimately it's up to him. But I also have to make him believe that even if I don't agree with him, that he's doing the right thing, so we can make a confident swing. Sometimes it's I feel like it's better to make a good swing with the wrong club than a bad swing with the right club. So ultimately it comes back to that communication, listening to what he wants to do, and then if I disagree, provide a planned argument, and I have facts to back up why I'm thinking what I'm thinking, and go from there. And the viewers at home, like you said, they like to hear that.
I'm kind of doing exactly what you're not supposed to do, which is start asking you questions. So back at you. So what do you got here?
So Joel and I have done an awesome job of communicating and being able to get to this Sentry Tournament of Champions. How has Sentry, in your eyes, made everything come together?
Well, first of all, they listened. We talked about it before. I will say, you know, Sentry's theme of being right by you is totally correct. And I'm going to tell you a little story. You know, everybody's had difficulties with COVID the last couple of years, but here I am on Maui, and I've had this Sentry relationship for a couple of years now, and we really trust each other. And some of the conversations that we've had to have the last couple of years, when they were in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and I was out here on Maui, and we were having to make decisions about what was going to happen and what the tournament was going to be like, I just came away with every one of them being impressed with them being right by me and being right by the people of Maui and right by the tournament and making the correct decisions. They could have pushed for certain things to happen, but they totally understood we're on the most remote island chain in the world out here. It's a very vulnerable place when it comes to the virus, and they've just been phenomenal. And in a lot of ways, like they've been like the caddy for me, in that I trusted them to come up with the right thought process. I wasn't ever really worried that they were going to, have an idea that was going to be outlandish and somehow I was going to have to tell the mayor of Maui or somebody, oh, here's what the sponsor wants to do, and it's stupid, but that's what they want to do. That's not Sentry at all. They listen, and the conversations that we have are really pretty unique, and especially in this COVID era, you can imagine.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, I was just thinking when you were telling the story about Lee Trevino, how you got offered a position after making that hole-in-one in 1984. I don't think I'm going to be getting a similar job offer anytime soon for my interview skills here.
Well, it's interesting. There was no David Faraday then. There was no Gary McCord. And literally, if you hadn't won a major championship, you didn't get a job as an analyst in network TV. And I really didn't understand why people might believe what I said or respect, an average player like I was. But what really happened was I somehow created a knack for being able to communicate.
Yeah.
And in my job, which, if you can believe it, I'm starting my 37th year this week.
Awesome.
It's all about communicating. And for me too, listening. Everybody thinks my job is all about talking, but there's a lot of times where I'm talking to 3 or 4 million people, and at the same time I have 2 different people talking to me.
Yeah.
I might have a producer in one ear, a director in another ear. So listening is an underrated quality to have.
How do you manage that much information coming in both ears?
Well, yeah, it took me a while to get used to it. I'll tell you that. Sometimes I turn the volume down on one side, actually, to be honest with you, depending on who's talking to me.
I turn the volume down on Joel sometimes, too.
You have to do that sometimes. But listening is a really underrated quality, and it's one that people always, jump to want to talk, and you can learn a lot more by listening, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Here's a question for you. Can you listen to a golf shot by Joel Damon and never see it and tell me whether or not it was a good shot?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Tell you where it is, even. I'd be looking at my yardage book and hear it on the driving range, and sometimes I don't know if I could tell you the club with an iron, but I could get close. I can tell you where it was hit and what direction it fell.
Just by
listening?
Wow.
Yeah. So, and you've been around golf long enough. You're probably pretty similar. But you bounce around between so many different players, though. That might be more difficult.
Yeah, and I don't see enough consistency. If you're with a guy a lot, you probably know. You can hear the sound of a quality shot.
The club turf interaction. You kind of have an idea of where it's going for sure.
My problem was my club hit the turf before the ball too many times. I think that was it.
No, it sounds like you had a heck of a golf career and even a better career in the TV. It's
for all the people out there listening, it's interesting. There's so few players that ever make a trip to Maui and let alone get on the PGA Tour. A couple hundred. But there's a lot of ways to be a part of the game and to grow yourself and the game without playing. And take a look at 2 guys like you and me. One of us are out there hitting the shots, but we're reaping the benefits of how the game has proliferated.
Over all your time covering golf, give me your favorite moment or 2 that stand out to you.
My favorite moment. I interviewed Arnold Palmer after he played in his last round ever in a U.S. Open, which was '94, and it was at Oakmont, and he had grown up in western Pennsylvania, so it was a very, very difficult kind of entire week for him, really. Wasn't competitive anymore at the time. And it was Friday afternoon. He wasn't going to make the cut. We were on ESPN. I went to interview him. I was with him, and they had planned it so he was going to finish at 3 o'clock Eastern. At 3 o'clock, we were going to a World Cup soccer game live, so we had to get off the air. And at 3 o'clock, Arnold was still in signing his card, and Chris Berman was saying, we want to go down to Mark Rolfing with Arnold Palmer, but Arnold's not ready. And in the meantime, O.J. Simpson is in the Bronco in L.A., and there was all this strange stuff going on. All of a sudden, Arnold came out, and he walked directly out of the storing tent and came straight to me. And in the middle of it, Berman stopped and said, Arnold Palmer's down there with Mark Rolfing, and down they came. I asked him a question, and he said about 2 words, and he couldn't talk. And the tears started rolling out of his eyes. And he said, well, Mark, when you walk up the 18th hole and you get an ovation like that, and then he couldn't continue. And we were hard on time anyway, but I wasn't going to say anything. And we stayed on it. It seemed, Geno, to me like it was minutes, like 5 minutes. I'm sure it was 30 or 40 seconds, and the producers yelling at me, jump in there, get him to say something, and like nothing was being said. And it was that, I don't know, I remember that moment.
It just stood out. That
almost more than any. Although I remember one right up here too. We were just up on this 18th green in 2000. Ernie Els came to the last hole, tied for the lead. Par 5, and he made an eagle, and he lost. And he went into a playoff with Tiger, ultimately lost. But I don't know. That was the first event of the entire century, and it might have been the best finish we'll ever see.
I agree, and I've been playing golf, essentially my whole life, and I feel like that is one that stands out as one of my first professional golf memories. I remember the shirt Tiger was wearing, and I remember exchanging fist pumps, and I was just incredible.
Remember Ernie telling me that night, Ricky Roberts was caddying for him back then, and they had gone on down to the first hole, and they were playing the first, and Tiger hit it to about 70 feet, and I think Ernie was about just a little bit outside him. And as they were walking up, I was on the course, I heard Ricky say to Ernie, hey, just 2-putt, we'll go on to the next hole, no problem. And Ernie told me that night that as Tiger and Steve were walking by, Stevie Williams, he heard Tiger say to Stevie, I can make it. And he did.
Wow.
And Ernie said, that's the difference between us.
I got goosebumps when you said that.
Yeah, he said to Stevie, I can make it. Wow.
And he did. That's incredible. Well, Mark,
thanks, Geno.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me here for a few minutes and talking about Sentry and this awesome venue that we have here this week, awesome tournament. Couldn't be happier, and I hope this is many of the meetings that we have at this event.
Yeah, let's do it again, and hope I'm talking about you real late on Sunday afternoon.
I'd like that very much. Thanks again.